This is Tell Me What to Read, powered by Booktopia. I'm Nick Wasiliev, and I'm back in the studio for the first time in what seems like absolutely forever. And I'm super excited because I am joined by a special guest in the studio, Dominic Knight. He's a novelist, comedy writer, radio host, a media commentator. You probably know him as a founding member of the iconic comedy group The Chaser. His stints on ABC Radio, ABC Sydney, writings in the Sydney Morning Herald, the list goes on. Dominic, welcome to Tell Me What to Read.
Great to be here at the vast Booktopia headquarters. I've just seen heaps of very fancy robots zooming around delivering people's orders. So it's exciting to be in the epicenter of book distribution. I'm imagining that at some point during the podcast, a book will whiz past my head that some robots put in the wrong direction.
I wouldn't put it past it. It's always moving at a million miles an hour in that distribution centre, but it's good fun. And you're very welcome. It's nice to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, and it's... we were just walking around with our mutual acquaintance, Scott Whitmont, who has also obviously been on your show a few times as well.
Indeed he has.
Yeah, and, of course you're a published novelist yourself. You've done many books. So before I talk about, your reading habits and everything around that, I like to talk whenever I have authors on the podcast about, what draws you to books specifically. Where did that connection with books start for you?
I grew up in a very bookish family. So my grandmother was someone who taught kindergarten teachers, basically. She was in early childhood education, and she trained lots of kindy teachers, including, I believe, several Wiggles at one point. So all the people who do early childhood education and so on, when they get their qualifications, they learn from people like my grandmother. And so she had a great passion for children's books, and that was really her speciality. And so I was, as her first grandchild, I was lucky enough to be her guinea pig. So I would just always have all these books thrown at me and, what would I like to read? I remember The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She even knew some of the authors behind them. There was a great author called Pat Hutchins, who was a friend of hers, who did Rosie's Walk, which was a big book back in the day. And so I was just immersed in children's books from the start. But then my mother, who'd worked on the Macquarie Dictionary for a long time, ended up working for Random House for many years as their children's publisher. So I just had books in every direction. And I devoured them as a kid. I just loved reading. So it was natural for me, I guess, to go on and think, well, it'd be nice to write one. But the book that really made me think, you know what, I'm going to actually have a crack at this. And I ended up doing a master's in creative writing to try and figure out how you write a novel. There's a wonderful novel called Zigzag Street by Nick Earls, the Brisbane author. And it just felt like it was about people that I knew. It was about it was in this case a young guy who didn't really know what he was doing with his life and had a job that he didn't love and, hopeless love life. And it just felt like, wow, okay, I really relate to this character in this book, Zigzag Street. And I thought, well, that's the Australia that I know, this sort of inner city, confused, going to Chinese takeaways and with your mates and having your friends, your close friends being the people that you rely on emotionally and all that kind of stuff. So it just felt like, okay, this is the first novel I've ever read that feels like I could be a character in it. And so that made me think, well, I want to write a novel that's sort of like this. And that got me started on the first book I wrote, which was called Disco Boy, which is sort of a thinly veiled version of me making different life choices and so on. And it was wrestling with the things I was thinking about. What do you do in life? Do you do the things you love, or do you do the things you think you're supposed to do? How do you figure out what a career is? How do you find someone to spend your life with and not stuff it up and all that sort of stuff? So those were my thoughts, I guess, in my late 20s when I started writing fiction. And it still feels like the best way to explore life and all the things that happen. The actual substance of life is often best addressed via novels, I think. And so that's why I got interested in it. And I haven't written a novel for a while, but I'm keen to get back into it because it's the best form of therapy it is. You get to package up all your issues and whatever and just put them on the page for other people to dissect.
Yeah, I think those are the best kind of novels that there are. The ones where you're sitting there reading it, you can't stop turning the page and you're like, oh my God, this is me. This is everything that I am dealing with right now or experiencing right now or connecting to or empathizing with. I think it's the best experience you can have. Was writing a novel, Disco Boy, Comrades, Man vs. Child, how was it actually the actual process of writing for you compared to the process of reading it? Did it make you go, Okay.
It's a lot of work, but it was really joyful. What I ended up doing was when I studied creative writing, I learned that every writer has their own technique. There's no one way to do it. But for me, it was all about go to a cafe, which I love doing. Like sitting down and working on a serious project I'm not great at, but going to a cafe I'm good at, ordering a coffee I'm good at, pulling out my laptop and trying to write 1,000 words before I get out of there. It just felt great. For some reason, I found being surrounded by other people a really great, quiet, private writing experience. I don't know why that is, but that worked for me. And so you've just got to find whatever it is that can force you to do the job again and again and again. And however many coffees it was, I had 80,000 words. And then you have to edit it and craft it and try and shape the story and work with editors and figure it out. But I just found it really joyful. It was just really also just to sort of scoop up that much of your inner thoughts and stuff and put them on the page, I really enjoyed. So, yeah, it was a lot of work, but never a hard moment. It was just always really fun, I think.
It's chatting with so many authors and some of them go, I went through so many processes of writer's block and stuff. Just whenever you do come back to it at the end of putting a book out, just the feeling of joy, the fact that you've put something out there in the world, that it's been put together with a whole bunch of people, I think is one of the most rewarding things there is.
Well, yes, in many ways, it's a giant self-indulgence.
It is
writing a novel.
It really is.
And it's saying, look, here's a thing that I just did. Pay $30 to read this or whatever it is, and it's quite. But it's kind of like you create a little theme park ride for your readers. I mean, you actually there's a journey that you've set up. It's not unlike the conveyor belts here. There are twists and turns and ups and downs, and you've put this path. And whenever people read it, if people read a novel of yours 10, 15 years later, it's as though that it's fresh to them. So it's kind of exciting to have this experience just packaged up between the pages for anyone to enjoy whenever they want.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about some of the other books you've written, because you did like Australiapedia, Trumpepedia, 2020 Dictionary, satire, translating satire to the page. And of course, I'm inevitably going to bring up the topic of the chaser, but what's one misconception of writing satire from your experience when people come up to you and talk about writing comedy?
Well, we started the Chaser newspaper in 1999, a very, very long time ago now. And bizarrely, we're actually about to bring it back, or probably by the time this comes out, we will have brought it back for a special one-off issue, which is available on our website. So it's kind of weird. We all came back to get to do another one all over again. But I think people just thought it was a bunch of people in the pub sinking a lot of beers and whatever, and just sort of throwing ideas around. It wasn't. It was a real slog. We would come every 2 weeks, or roughly every 2 weeks. Our subscribers would know it wasn't that reliable, but 2-ish weeks we'd get together and we'd spend 2 days basically not sleeping, just writing stuff. And it was all about the editing process as well, of taking a half good article and making it good and polishing it and finessing it. And it was actually a craft we all had to learn. So everyone who worked on the Chaser, I don't think anyone started out writing amazing satire, but by the time we'd done, I think we did 90 odd editions in the end, we'd gotten able to actually kind of hone it and figure out what the point was. And the thing about satire that I love is that it's both humorous, you're making people laugh, but it's incredibly earnest. The point you're making in good satire is the sort of point that, if you made it at a dinner party, you come over as really earnest and boring and worthy or whatever. But satire is really a medium for frustrated idealists. It's for people who want the world to be better in a certain way, are frustrated by the fact that the world doesn't live up to what you are hoping for, and then you can write an article that lets you vent your rage, and if you're lucky, or a book in that case, other people will actually enjoy it and relate to it. So I don't know. There's something very beautiful about satire as a way of both dreaming of a better world, but also getting angry that we aren't there.
Yeah, and I feel like it's becoming increasingly relevant, especially in the online space. I think now's a good time to talk about the Chaser, because I'm 28. I grew up watching CNN, Hamster Wheel, the Chaser's War and everything. And we talk about those shows and what you guys got up to at school the following day. That was the sort of space that we were in. Obviously Chaser still very much continues on these days online, but part of me also thinks whenever I'm looking at, looking back at watching, Chaser's War and stuff, that in these days, like, how could you get away with a show like The War and Everything in today's world?
Well, there were lots of things that made that show work well that you wouldn't have assumed. I mean, I think it was a time when it was easy to have cheap cameras, and we had lots of cameras, and we're always filming things from different angles, because with a stunt, you never know what's going to happen. So, I mean, I held a handy cam a whole bunch of times. But these days with a smartphone, if you went anywhere near a politician during an election campaign, every other person would have video of it and they'd release it. You wouldn't get to edit it and make it funny. And the key to television, and particularly comedy television, to editing, it's all about, shaping this raw footage into a narrative that works and cutting out the bits that didn't work and so on. And so I think with us, we were just really lucky to have the opportunity to essentially have a playground to muck around in. And the Chaser worked, I think, well because the team had very different senses of humour. So you had people who, probably my end of the thing, we wanted to get stuck into politics and talk about elections and the government and so on, and go and do things to the Prime Minister and the opposition leader or whoever it was. But then there were people in the team who just liked silly, character-based comedy and dressing up in silly outfits and doing sketches. And so you had for CNN, which is the first time we really did this formula, you had all this stuff about Iraq and the war in Iraq and trying to make some really, express our outrage that this invasion had gone ahead, that we all felt very, very firmly about, and the marches that were on. But at the same time, we invented this fast food brand called Fungries, which is a parody of McDonald's, and let us and Burger King, and let us dress up and wear silly clothes and have a fake cow that was sort of halfway being eaten. And so it was at once silly, but also trying to make some sort of a point about the fast food industry. So we were just really lucky to be able to have all these different strands of silliness that kids liked, but also the more earnest satire that political types liked. And I think we're just lucky to have that blend of people, and it's kind of an unusual mix of personalities. So it was a joy to do, and we're still very close. Actually, on the Chaser Report podcast that we do, the week after the election, six of the original 7 Chaser people got in a room and chatted about it, and it was just lovely to still have that dynamic between us and still be able to make each other laugh. And we were only ever trying to make each other laugh, really, to get a laugh in the writers' room. That was what the whole thing was about.
I was going to ask you about the Chaser Report and also this upcoming Chaser newspaper edition that you've got going on, because you've got everyone, the original guys who are all coming back. Yeah, we do. It's a bizarre thing. So the National Art School, which is a place where you would normally go to study landscape painting, they've got a program of events that they're doing to kind of get people into their amazing space in Darlinghurst. So it's an old jail that's made out of beautiful sandstone, and then it was kind of a mental asylum at one point, I think, and now it's an art school, because that seems to be the evolution of these sorts of spaces. And they've got this amazing thing called the Cell Block Theatre, and they said to us, why don't you do a night? We'll help you put out another newspaper, like cover some of the costs of that, and come along and have an event and talk about satire and all this kind of stuff. And we thought, that would be amazing to do another newspaper, which of course would not be a commercially sensible thing to do. But we never wanted to close down the newspaper. It just became too much of a financial loss, and we were doing TV and other stuff. But I'd love it if the newspaper still existed. It was great fun. Yeah, I know. Well, I'll include a link to it in the description to the pre-order at the time we're recording, but it will be out, when this podcast is out, so everyone can go and check it out. But additionally, also this Chaser Report podcast too that you've been doing with Charles Firth and various others as well. Gabby Bolt and all that bunch. Yeah. How did that come about? Well, it was really an evolution of the radio show that we did. So we've always got different projects on the go, and we did a radio show for Triple M for a couple of years, and it was it didn't quite work for them because basically it was hard to sell ads. Advertisers didn't want to invest in the Chaser because they were worried that we'd be mean to them, I think. And I can see where they're coming from. We did annoy a lot of brands over the years, so that, understandably. But then we sort of evolved it as a podcast, and the really nice thing about podcasting, and you see this increasingly in the online space, and we were discussing before how self-published authors, a company like Booktopia can actually make things happen for them. So it's always great when you can take out the kind of people in the middle. So podcasting has this thing of you record something in a room like this, similar gear we use, you press stop, you upload it. It's just there. It's on the internet immediately. And that's just beautiful for us. There's no legal review, no editorial, no meetings with people who, don't necessarily get what we're doing. So podcasting is a really exciting medium, and I reckon, 5 to 10 years it will be kind of the dominant audio medium, because it's just the best for creators with no one standing in your way. And on radio, you've got to do a time call and do the traffic and all this kind of stuff. But with podcasting, you can enjoy it whenever you like. I have no idea who'll be listening to this and when
Will they be in the car? Will they be going for a jog? Who knows? It's the user can kind of go at their own pace, much like a book. It's the audio version of a book, podcasting.
Yeah,
in a way.
I think that's why it's taken off like it has. I mean, if you'd said 5-10 years ago that podcasting would be where it is, most people would have gone, how, where has all this come from? But it, like you say, it touches on that whole storytelling element. Like you're having a conversation. You feel like you're there. You're part of the conversation with the people in the room. Literally. Well,
the two of us are sitting in a little room at Booktopia headquarters, but in a sense, the listeners are here too. When they hear it, they'll be brought into this room. And let me say, a book just narrowly escaped my head.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that.
Calm down, Book Robot.
Look, the Book Robot, he had a moment. He was just like, he hasn't had his morning coffee. It happens. It's all over the place. I feel like in today's world, and it's interesting you were talking about satire. I kind of want to talk about this because, Chase's War especially was not just about the news, but it was on the topic of the news, but it was also about the news cycle. And I think, especially in today's world, it seems more important than ever for a show like that or a topic like that. Having kind of been on the inside of this group for many years, where does it sit, like the Chaser themselves, sit for you within kind of the Aussie media landscape and what it functions as?
Well, it's an interesting thing because to have a career in the media, which is getting harder every year, it's much harder now than it was when we started to have a long-term career in the media. There have been so many challenges to all the things that help the media make money. As we know, newspapers aren't what they were, television's not what it was anymore in terms of audiences and revenue. You kind of have to do all kinds of things. You've got to write columns, you've got to write books, you've got to do radio and whatever you can kind of do. So we're in this weird situation of satirising all these things and coming out and attacking various newspapers or whatever. And I mean, certainly we've had a lot to say about the world's largest media conglomerate over the years. But then you end up working with people or for people. And so we made fun of ABC radio programs. We made fun of Triple J, for instance, for a long time. And then some of the group ended up being presenters on Triple J. I spent a lot of time doing serious talk radio, or semi-serious anyway. We try and keep it semi-serious. But and that's just the reality of life in the media. So we're kind of both critics and participators in a very hypocritical way. And our original newspaper had this great column, which Julian Morrow did, called Media Critic. And it would basically, it was kind of like a print version of Media Watch, just taking bits of newspapers and commenting on them and making fun of them. And that came from a really earnest place of wanting the media to be better. And so I think that's the thing. We really want the media to be better than it is. We had a lot of fun with tabloid current affairs shows like Today Tonight and Current Affair back in the day. There was a bit of a war between Andrew Hansen and Chaz Lucidello against Today Tonight, which at one point culminated in a standoff where they were sort of virtually imprisoned inside their studios, having blagged their way in there. But yeah, I think in the media landscape, the media is so important. It's all that we have to hold the powerful, to account. And it often lets you down, but the good thing is that gives you room for satire. So satire of the media has always been a big part of what the Chaser does, and I'm sure, as long as the media has any power, there'll be people satirising it and expecting it to be better than it is.
Yeah, and it definitely brings things into perspective when you have the chance to put that satire front and centre on display. Like I still remember that whole situation that happened where you guys got stuck in their studio, and you weren't legally allowed to share certain footage and all of the stuff that happened there as well.
It was really, and the great thing was, if you got in trouble, if one of them tried to attack you, the other one would defend you. So you'd get a piece from a current affair going, the Chaser are fantastic, like they're holding him, and then when you attack them, they'd be like, oh, they're terrible, they break all the rules, they got no respect. So yeah, you can't win. But it was just fun back then being in that national conversation. And television's such a mass medium. Doing a TV show just lets you be part of, I guess, the national consciousness in a way that no other medium really lets you. So that was fun for a while.
Yeah. Even all the in-jokes. Like the in-jokes that went throughout the show.
There were a lot of in-jokes.
Well, okay, I'm about to go out on a limb here and show how much of a nerd I was and how much I watched the show.
We love it. That was our core audience.
There was a running gag during season 3. During the last season, and I think you know where I'm going with this. There was a video of an old woman with a trolley,
Yes.
that kept appearing in sketches. You just kept throwing it at some point, and then apparently she got in contact with you guys, asked you to no longer put it out, and so what did they do? They replaced it with a video of you.
Of me, yeah. That was, which I think was done without my consent, by the way. It became this weird running joke, and I think by that point, we'd done the War and Everything had, I think it was something like 23 episodes for the first 2 years, and then we came back for another sort of 8 that were quite ill-fated because we got in trouble and all this kind of stuff. But I think we just got to the point where we were so exhausted from it. And so it was a bit of burnout and so on. So we really were just putting things in to amuse ourselves. And that was an example where some of the team, in trying to make each other laugh, just went quite crazy with this weird in-joke. And I think I'm not sure what... My recollection is that there was some very good reason why we had to cut that, where we decided to cut that footage out for the...
She probably would have been like, okay, can you stop showing me every Wednesday night?
I don't think it was our kindest thing, let's just say that at all. We might have forgotten about the person involved in the footage rather than just using it. But, I mean, look, it's in the nature of comedy groups. The group that we loved watching growing up with the D generation, there was a show called The Late Show that we were all obsessed with. And they were constantly doing in-jokes and undermining each other and so on. So... they put me in there to make fun of me, and I was all there for it. If you're part of the Chaser, you get made fun of constantly, and that's always been the deal.
On the subject of that, so what you've got the 100th edition coming up. You've got the Chaser Report podcast. What else is there in the works?
So the thing we're doing that we're really looking forward to, actually, and this will have started as well by the time this comes out, but let's hope it's continuing when you hear this, is we're doing live podcasts. So we're going to a pub. There's a pub near where we live, and we're the Harold Park Hotel. We're going there. We're doing our daily podcast. We're doing it all in one night, basically. So 4 episodes, and then there'll be a bonus episode for people who subscribe. So we're kind of trying to monetize that, as they say, as an experiment. And so that's going to be a big part of what we're doing. But there's always new projects brewing from various people, and we can never say what they are until they get up or don't get up. But, I mean... The group come together to do various things. Everyone has their own career and their own interests that they pursue as well. But I like to think that Chaser will be around and being disreputable for years to come. I certainly hope that's true.
Yeah, I certainly hope so too. Will we also see any more books? Will we see any more?
Well, I've got one in the works now I probably can't talk about, which is a genuinely different project for me, but I've really enjoyed it. Let's just say it's more visually based. Normally the things like Trumpedia and Strayapedia were very text-based. This is the first thing I've done that's going to be quite visually based, and I think it's going to be really fun. It'll be out for Christmas, so nice. I might come and chat to you when it's out. But I really want to write some more novels. I've got all these, particularly during the pandemic, I had all these ideas and wanted to get stuck in and thought it'd be good to do a pandemic novel, but I was minding my tiny daughter and it just didn't really have the energy. But yeah, so I think it'd be really nice to get back into writing fiction again, because of all the things that I've done over the years, the fiction's a thing that actually lasts in a way. Like, it's still there in libraries, it's still there. It's still there as ebooks, but you can order them online and they'll print to order. I don't think any of them are still actually technically in print, but these days you can't be out of print. You order a book and it gets printed especially for you. And I like the idea that these little packages of whatever I was like when I was 30 or something, or a little bit older, at the point where I was thinking about, will I ever have children of my own? I wrote a book about that. I wrote a book about student politics, which I've found ridiculous, and student politicians still read the book and ask me about it. I still get emails about it. And so it's nice to have a little package of who you were at the time. It's like a little bit of a memento in a way.
Time capsule.
Yeah, whereas all these podcast episodes and radio, particularly radio shows, just the moment they're finished, no one ever listens to them again. They just go into the archives. But I think a novel has this possibility of enduring, which is really exciting. So I think with whatever years I have left, I'd like to keep pumping some more out, because I don't know, there's just, not only is it probably the most beautiful creative process that there is, but it's nice to just have them there 20 years later or whatever it is. I think the first one came out 15 years ago or something. They sit there and they're there for other people to discover. So yeah, and places like Booktopia kindly put them out and keep things available. So long may that continue. Long may people buy physical books and keep going.
Absolutely, and we'll look forward to when that book, those eventual books come down the pipeline. We're near the end of the show, and I want to first of all, like as you know, tradition within our little show, like to ask you about the books that you've been reading and enjoying of late. Have you got any recommendations for our audience?
So, as part of the Chaser, I just love watching arrogant people get their comeuppance. It's something we've always very much enjoyed and commented on. And so the book I'm reading at the moment, which I really recommend to anyone who's into Schadenfreude, is a book called $1 Billion Loser, The Epic Rise and Fall of Wework. So Wework is the world's most dominant co-working company. So they rent hot desks, they rent little offices to people. And the idea is you don't need to go and get a proper office yourself. You can just pay them, and then if your startup goes bankrupt in 6 months, you can just leave. But the guy who founded it, Adam Newman, is just the most ridiculously overambitious person. And he just built and built and built and just kept raising more and more and more billions of dollars from investors. And I remember talking to people during their peak going, how are they worth whatever it was, $26 billion? Don't they just hire office buildings, cut them up and just package them to other people? Like, how is that worth billions of dollars? And this guy's going around going, oh, we're building a physical social network. And all these investors went, yes. And this Japanese investor who runs a company called SoftBank, which is a big company in Japan, put billions of dollars, $4 billion or something, into WeWork. And at one point, I actually wrote part of my book, I think it was the Australian Dictionary that I wrote. I went to a WeWork for a month. And they had this promotion where if you put in a promo code, they gave you a free month. So I went, turned up, had free beer, had fruit water, which they were offering, and enjoyed these fancy offices for 1 month while I was writing. A friend of mine and I went in there and just did our work for a month. But we couldn't, it was just so weird. And so it's kind of weird. I mean, they're still around. WeWork's still very popular. But they're actually run in a sensible way now and have a good valuation. I like them, but it was just crazy. So I kind of enjoyed watching the whole investment billionaire universe come crashing down. And there's a TV series made out of it called We Crashed as well, which is out now. So that's really fun, $1 Billion Loser. During the pandemic, I really enjoyed a novel called Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which is one of the most unflinching portrayals of someone going through a mental health crisis that I've ever read. But it's also described in the most original and interesting way. But the book is also hilariously funny. And it's about a woman who doesn't know what to do with her life and can't quite get herself together, can't work out how to make her marriage work, can't work out how to, essentially even just function in this world. And her whole family have similar issues. But the way she expresses herself is so hilarious. We always say in The Chaser that any subject can be funny. You just got to have the right target. And this book really proves that because it's somehow both tragic and life-affirming and hilarious. So it really was a great way to get through the pandemic. So I recommend that. And the last one, my guilty, I'll recommend two more quick ones. The first one is called The Game. It's by Sean Kelly. He came on our Chaser Report podcast. This is the book about Scott Morrison. And it's Sean Kelly's an old friend of mine, and it was so wonderful watching his success with this book because it's the only book I've ever read where the author confessed partway through the book that he didn't want to write it, that someone had come to him and said, write a book about Scott Morrison. And he'd gone, I don't want to. I don't like him kind of thing. But the portrayal of Scott Morrison and his strengths and weaknesses and his personal history and the way he constructed the persona that he had and brought to the election and which the country's just voted against as we record this, it's just a fascinating portrait of what it takes to succeed in politics and the flaws of what constitutes success and so on. And it's just a brilliant piece of writing. So anyone who loves politics, if you haven't read The Game, it is really a great read. And even if you're a supporter of Scott Morrison, I think you can see some of the seeds of his downfall in that. And the final recommendation, this is for anyone who loves writing. There are two books by a guy called Andy Martin about one of my favourite subjects, guilty reading pleasure, which is Jack Reacher. I've read every Jack Reacher book. They're great fun. But the first one is called Reacher Said Nothing. And during this book, this eccentric academic, Andy Martin from Cambridge, sits at the side of Lee Child while he's writing one of his novels called Make Me, and just watches as he does it. And he genuinely has no idea where the story is going to go when he starts typing. He invents a character on the first page and no clue why he's been buried in the middle of a field, and then Reacher turns up and tries to solve it. And you can sort of see, if you're interested in how writing works, you can actually watch a real master of the thriller putting this thing together. And then there's a sequel called With Child where he goes on the book tour for the book with Lee Child. So if you love the world of books, and you probably do if you're listening to this, those two books by Andy Martin, Reacher Said Nothing and With Child, are just fascinating and quite bizarre. So, yeah, a good read.
Well, those two are going on my TBR, definitely. I always, whenever I, chat with fellow authors and stuff, I always like to hear about their process and things that they're up to. So
yeah, well, Lee Child is a bizarre individual who just drinks an insane amount of coffee and smokes a lot, but he writes very, very unput-downable thrillers.
Yeah, he definitely does. I absolutely love that you mentioned Sorrow and Bliss as well. I think that book really made a lot of waves when it first came out for its depiction of a very serious topic and the...
But I promise it's funny.
No.
Yeah,
I feel like
but it's both things. This is the amazing thing about it. It's sorrow and bliss in the one novel.
Exactly. It ripped through the office when people, because
sure.
we often have this situation within our office when when a certain book comes out and everyone knows that it's good. That you're competing for the proof books that you get in front of you.
Well, that's how I discovered it. Someone on Twitter who I really respect, Marie Hardy, who's an author herself and a TV writer and so on, a radio presenter. She just said this book is amazing. If everyone's got to read it, and I was like, okay, I trust her. She was not wrong.
She was not wrong, definitely. We're nearly done. We've got to wrap this up soon, but I always like to finish with a couple of fun bookish questions for any of our guests. So, hypothetical, what is the perfect idea of a night with a book for you?
Look, I'd like to say it was curled up in front of a log fire or something, but to be honest, it's anywhere, because whenever I read a book, I forget about the rest of the world. So I think just in a cafe with a good coffee, and wherever I'm in the world, I'm transported into the pages of the book, and that's why I love reading.
Yeah, that's like I'm the sort of red wine kind of in front of a fire sort of person.
Yeah, look, it's a good option, but I won't even notice the fire once I start reading the book.
And even having the hubbub of people around you would probably be quite.
Yeah, you don't need noise cancelling headphones with a good book.
No, you
don't even notice.
If you were only able to read one genre for the rest of your life, what would you go for?
I think it'd have to be my all-time favourite, which is the comic novel. I just love. I mean, I mentioned Nick Earls before, but and Nick Hornby. There's a lot of good writers. My friend Jessica Detman has written some great books recently in that space. But my all-time favourite author is probably P.G. Wodehouse, who wrote the Jeeves books and so on. And just the ability of a book to just make you laugh, there's nothing like it. You can do the most sustained and detailed comic portrayals of anything. So I think comic novel would be what I have to go with.
If someone wrote a biography about your life,
it'd be incredibly boring.
Don't sell yourself short. What would you call it, and who would you like to write it?
I'd probably write it based on my various misadventures going for. I think who would do a good version of my life? Look, to be honest, Lee Child. I'd love Lee Child to have me as a character. I'd probably get killed in about page 50, but I know Jack Reacher would avenge me, and that would make it worthwhile.
And that would be the ultimate compliment, to say that Jack Reacher avenged you.
It would. He'd do a good job.
You meet Stephen King in a lift.
Right.
You've got time for one question. What is it?
How do you pump out so much? That's the thing that gets me. I mean, they're great, but just the prolific nature of some of these authors just does my head in. That's what I want to know. How do you get the volume? And I think he'd probably just say, I just do. It's just me. I'm just very, very good at this.
He's just got it. He just has that ability, that ability that we wish we all had. And then, of course, classic last question. You're stuck on a desert island, and while you await rescue, you get to take 3 books with you. What books do you take?
Oh, that's very, very hard. If I've got to kill a lot of time, this experience actually kind of happened to me. It happened to all of us during the pandemic. We were all stuck for a very, very long period of time. The best thing that I did during the pandemic was read Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell series. Oh, yes. So Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and The Mirror and the Light. And they're so long. So I'd want to bring all 3 of those. And that would let me kill several months while I waited to be rescued and be immersed in an incredible... it transports you to a world that none of us have ever seen in, medieval England at the time of Henry VIII. But it's just so you can just imagine what it must have been like to live as the right-hand man of this very, very difficult king who could just kill anyone at the drop of a hat and then does.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he dies at the end. I think everyone knows that. But it just, I don't know. I don't know quite how she managed to create the world so vividly and I don't know how accurate it is historically. I imagine very accurate. But yeah, those 3 books could kill time for anyone, anywhere. I can't recommend them enough.
Those books are honestly amazing. The amount of work that Hilary Mantel did. I had last week Joanna Gilmore, who is kind of a curator at the National Portrait Gallery in Canberra, and they've got an exhibition down there right now. And in that exhibition, it's a whole bunch of portraits from the National Gallery in London. And she, off the back of seeing the portraits of Elizabeth and Henry VIII, started diving into Hilary Mantel. And she hasn't got the heart to read The Mirror and the Light because she knows Thomas dies.
But I mean, we all do. It's a question of what you do with the years you have, and he did so much. What an extraordinary man he was.
He did. It's an incredible series. Highly recommended to any of our listeners who haven't checked it out. I can honestly chat to you all day, but unfortunately we have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Dom. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
It's been joyful. Thanks for having me, and all the best to the robots.
Indeed. Well, hopefully they've just come off their coffee break, so hopefully there won't be as many books flying over our heads.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
For all of our listeners, you can buy books mentioned today from booktopia.com.au. I'll include links to all of Dom's books as well down in the description, which you can check out below. And we'll catch you next Wednesday for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening and never stop reading.